Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Thursday, November 6, 2025. Senate Republicans and Senate Democrats hold lengthy, separate, private meetings on day 37 of the federal government shutdown, strategizing on how to end the stalemate. Republicans say they will bring to a vote a new proposal that includes some regular fiscal year 2026 spending bills and a promise for a vote on extending health insurance premium tax credits. President Donald Trump comments about plans to cut 10% of airline flights at 40 of the busiest U.S. airports due to air traffic controller staffing shortages during the government shutdown. U.S. House Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, Democrat of California, announces she will not run for reelection, ending a career of nearly 40 years in Congress. The current House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries calling Pelosi the greatest speaker in U.S. history. President Donald Trump says she is an evil woman and a tremendous liability for the country. President Trump announces a deal with the makers of popular weight loss drugs to drastically cut prices for consumers. The Senate votes on whether to block the president from conducting military operations against Venezuela. And the leaders of 5 Central Asian countries are in Washington as the Trump administration looks to secure new sources of rare earth minerals. That and more coming up on Washington Today. Semaphore writing that Senate Democrats appear ready to hold their ground in the fight over the government shutdown. Members of the caucus emerged from a 2-hour meeting on Thursday, declaring that the 47-member group is coalescing around a unified strategy rather than splintering into factions, which could mean the government funding fight lasts well beyond the current 37 days. Republicans are poised to force Democrats to vote on reopening the government anyway. They're signaling the Senate will stay in session at least until Friday to vote on a government funding measure that would marry a stopgap bill with several full-year funding bills. A number of Democrats are looking to end the shutdown, but probably not enough to prevail in a vote on Friday, according to multiple people familiar with the situation. One source familiar with the caucus dynamics confirmed the Democrats are inclined to continue their fight to keep online expiring health care subsidies at this point. That was from Semaphore News. CNN reporter Manu Raju posted a couple of clips of 2 Democratic senators he and other reporters spoke to in the hallways on Capitol Hill about their discussions on the way forward. First, Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire, then Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut.
I think talks continue to be productive, and hopefully we can get to a resolution. I think we need to get government back up. We need to make sure that people are getting their benefits so they can continue to eat. We need to make sure that airports are open and air traffic controllers are getting paid. And we need to make sure that federal employees who have been RIF'd are able to come back to work and that they get paid.
It ought to be part of whatever government funding agreement there is, and settling for some kind of vague promise about a vote in the future on some indeterminate bill without any definite inclusion in the law, I think is a mistake.
And it would be a letdown to your voters?
I think voters would rightly see it as a surrender.
Senator Richard Blumenthal, Democrat from Connecticut, and Jeanne Shaheen, Democrat from New Hampshire, as posted by CNN reporter Manu Raju. The Semaphore News article notes that the Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, says he's willing to guarantee a vote but not an outcome on extending those expiring health care premium subsidies. Article says House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, is unwilling to even promise a vote in the House on the subsidies. While all that was happening off the Senate floor, here is Senator Thune on the Senate floor this morning to start the day.
Democrats, of course, have claimed their decision to shut down the government's about health care. They want Republicans to bail out their Obamacare mess. And as I've said probably 1,000 times now, Mr. President, Republicans are 100% willing to sit down and talk about the mess that Democrats have created. We're just not going to have that conversation while Democrats are holding the federal government hostage. That was our position in September. That was our position in October. And yes, it's still our position in November. We're just waiting for Democrats to take yes for an answer. Mr. President, I do know that Democrats have been under a lot of pressure from the far left. The far left pushed them to shut down the government. and the far left has pushed them to keep it shut down. As one House Democrat told Axios yesterday, and I quote, "There would be hell to pay if Senate Democrats don't let events play out," end quote. There would be hell to pay if Senate Democrats don't let events play out. That quote from a House Democrat just yesterday. Well, Mr. President, what events need to play out? What more needs to happen for the far left to be satisfied? The pain this shutdown has caused is only getting worse. 40 million Americans who rely on food assistance programs are now at risk of going hungry without a resolution to the shutdown. I'm sure these Americans are doing everything in their power to feed their families, but they can't do that forever. Federal workers have now gone without pay for more than a month, including the people in this building. Will the far left not be satisfied until federal workers and military families are getting their Thanksgiving dinner from a food bank? Because that's where we're headed. And then, Mr. President, there's air travel. Yesterday, the Transportation Secretary announced that as a matter of safety, the Department of Transportation is requiring mandatory reduction in air traffic starting tomorrow because of shutdown staffing issues. That means widespread flight cancellations, supply chain issues, hundreds of thousands of passengers dealing with disruptions to travel every day. The impact this will have will be immense.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican from South Dakota, today on the Senate floor. The Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, also spoke on the Senate floor. He called on President Donald Trump and Republican congressional leaders to meet with the Democratic leaders and negotiate a shutdown-ending deal that will include an extension of expiring Affordable Care Act health insurance premium tax credits.
Americans plagued by high costs fired a political torpedo this week at Donald Trump and Republicans. They spoke loudly and clearly. We are fed up with the high cost of living. We're fed up with the tax on health care. We're fed up with your broken promises. And the question now is, will Donald Trump and Republicans listen to the American people? Will Republicans finally work with Democrats to reopen the federal government and negotiate a fix to the ACA premium crisis? Will Donald Trump finally take a break from his lavish ballrooms to help families who can't afford the rent, can't afford health care? The American people are waiting, and Democrats are ready. We want to have negotiations. It's been long enough. Look, if Republicans were smart, they would get the message after Tuesday that their do-nothing strategy isn't working. Even Donald Trump knows Americans hold Republicans responsible for this mess. Here's what he said. The shutdown was a big factor. He was talking about, why did you lose the election? He said the shutdown was a big factor, negative for the Republicans. Again, Donald Trump's words. The shutdown was a big factor, negative for the Republicans. That's what he said about the elections Tuesday. This is probably the smartest thing President Trump has said in a while.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, on the Senate floor. And again, reporting, this from Politico, that the Senate Majority Leader John Thune telling fellow Republicans in a private lunch that he plans to hold a vote Friday that could pave the way to end the government shutdown, and that will include a package of a new continuing resolution, a temporary funding measure, along with 3 regular fiscal year 2026 spending bills, and some sort of guarantee that there will be a vote on extending those expiring tax credits from the Affordable Care Act. Also, plenty of reporting that the Democrats will be opposing this, meaning the government shutdown will extend beyond today's 37 days, likely into the weekend. Associated Press writing that airports in New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago are among the 40 of the busiest across the U.S., where flights will be cut starting Friday due to the government shutdown, according to a list distributed to the airlines and obtained by the Associated Press. The Federal Aviation Administration announced Wednesday it would reduce air traffic by 10% across high-volume markets to maintain travel safety as air traffic controllers go unpaid and exhibit signs of strain during the shutdown. The affected airports in more than 24 states include the busiest ones across the U.S., including Atlanta, Denver, Dallas, Orlando, Miami, and San Francisco. In some of the biggest cities, such as New York, Houston, and Chicago, multiple airports will be affected. That was from AP. Senator Bernie Moreno, Republican from Ohio, questioned John Delu, nominated for a seat on the National Transportation Safety Board, at today's confirmation hearing before the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee.
How many people do you know in your career that were either your coworkers that went a month and a half without getting a paycheck? Have you ever experienced that? In other words, would you like when you were just starting your young family, would you have gone a month and a half without a paycheck?
Well, I would hope I would not have had to do that. I'm sure I'd be mowing lawns then.
Right, and that would add enormous stress to you, your family, your spouse, your kids.
Yes,
Having to
Senator.
think about daycare, right? You can't afford daycare. Daycare doesn't take credit. They expect to get paid.
Yes,
And
sir.
all that circulating through somebody's mind adds even more stress. Is that fair?
Yes, Senator.
You need to be crisp and on. About a week ago, very unreported story, there was a helicopter, see if this story sounds familiar. There was a helicopter flying through the airspace at Cleveland Hopkins Airport. Fortunately, it was a nice day, and that helicopter flew almost directly in front of an inbound Southwest Airlines flight at 2,000 feet with almost no separation, vertical separation. They were literally on a collision path. Now, when you're a pilot and you can see things out of the cockpit, it's a lot easier to be able to prevent those kinds of accidents. Is that accurate? Because you can see the obstacle in front of you?
Yes, Senator.
And you've flown into Cleveland Hopkins before in your career?
Many times, sir.
So, you know, we're like Texas. We have beautiful weather 365 days a year. Now, imagine if that had been, instead of last week, a nice sunny day, imagine it had been a heavy snowstorm, zero visibility, snow showers, and you were totally dependent on instrumentation. What would have possibly happened in that situation?
Senator, thank you for the question. I'm not 100% familiar with the event you're referring to, and I remember reading or seeing something about that. Based on what you're telling me, I assume there's an investigation going on.
There is.
And with that being the case, I would prefer not to get a hold of the NTSB, and I'd prefer to recuse and not discuss that yet.
And Mr. Chairman, the point I'm trying to make is obvious. We've asked these air traffic controllers to go into a dark room in a very stressful job where there's all kinds of regulations about what they can and can't do because we want to reduce that stress. And we're now day 37 into a government shutdown in which they have not gotten paid, and they're being used as political pawns. And quite frankly, I find that atrocious. I find it atrocious that the Air Traffic Controllers Union itself, not exactly a right-wing organization, has begged Democrats to allow us to have a vote to open the government. But Democrats have refused, and they're playing with people's lives. They're allowing our skies to become more dangerous. So for my Democrat colleagues, especially in this committee, that constantly talk about how important safety is, why don't we actually open the government today? Or actually let us have a vote. Let us have a vote to open the government and get people paid.
Senator Bernie Moreno, Republican from Ohio, questioning John Delu, nominated for a seat on the National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, at today's confirmation hearing, the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee. Fate of air travel and expected 10% cut of flights beginning Friday also came up today as President Trump took questions from reporters in the White House Oval Office.
Sir, that the FAA is going to have to cut about 10% of flights at the top 40 airports because of the government shutdown. Are you at all concerned that it might not be safe to fly right now? And what do you tell people who are gearing up for
that's why they're cutting. Yeah, it's a fair question. As Sean Duffy announced, they're cutting in certain areas 10%, and they want to make sure it's 100% safe. That's why they're doing it.
Mr. President, given these modifications that are being made to air travel, the other disruptions with the government shutdown, Do you think it's time for Republicans in Congress to change their negotiating position at all?
In what way?
To start making concessions to Democrats?
Well, I think it's time for them to end the filibuster and just put everybody back to work. Vote in voter ID, vote in no mail-in voting except for military, faraway military, and people that are very sick. I'd like to see one-day voting. I'd like to see not 65 days of voting from all over the place. No, I'd like to clean up the elections. The border, we've done a great job. We have a great, strong border now. But I'd like to see new rules on immigration that can be fair and good, you know. But rules that you'll never get, rules that they're never going to get. There's so many things we could put in, including tax cuts that we could get, and we could do it all ourselves. But to do that, you have to end the filibuster. The filibuster is, and they'll do it too. They'll immediately do it. You know, what they're going to do is, what the Democrats will do is they're going to make Puerto Rico a state. They're going to make D.C. a state. They're going to pack the court. They're going to end up with more electoral votes. They're going to end up with 4 senators because of the 2 states. And they're going to do this 100%. They would have done it except Manchin and Sinema got in their way.
President Donald Trump speaking to reporters in the White House Oval Office. ABC News writing, a federal judge has ordered the Trump administration to make a payment to fully fund the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, for the month of November by tomorrow. U.S. District Judge John J. McConnell Jr. said people have gone without for too long. Not making payments to them for even another day is simply unacceptable. The judge directly rebuked President Donald Trump for stating his intent to defy a court order by saying earlier this week that SNAP will not be funded until the government reopens from the ongoing government shutdown. McConnell also said without SNAP funding for the month of November, 16 million children are immediately at risk of going hungry. He said this should never happen in America. That was from ABC News. And from NBC News, an official with the Agriculture Department told a federal court Wednesday that allotments to SNAP beneficiaries for November will be 65% of the normal rate instead of the 50% previously estimated by the Trump administration. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, a Democrat, visited the Weinberg Northeast Regional Food Bank in Pittston, Pennsylvania today to talk about the more than $350 million in federal money the state spends each month on SNAP.
Unfortunately, because of the longest federal government shutdown in history, 2 million Pennsylvanians lost their food assistance for the first time ever. In the entire history of SNAP, this is the first time ever that payments did not go out. This is all because the Trump administration has decided that it will not be issuing SNAP benefits for the month of November. Understand how it works. At the beginning of each month, folks have their SNAP cards. Money is loaded up onto it. They use that when they go to grocery stores. Now they can't do that because their cards are empty this month. And they're empty even though the federal government has billions of dollars on hand in congressionally appropriated contingency funds. I want you to know that I didn't stand idly by while the Trump administration refused to fund SNAP. I took them to court and I won. And as a result of our lawsuit, the courts ruled in our favor and said that the Trump administration must use that contingency fund that it has to distribute at least partial payments to SNAP recipients. But now the United States Department of Agriculture is actually telling states that we have to jump through a whole bunch of bureaucratic hoops that by their own admission will delay SNAP payments for more than 1 month. That's their own admission. They're also giving us unclear and conflicting guidance that confuses the process even more. We have a better way and a faster way that ironically the Trump administration had previously approved, where we could get these payments out within 10 days. My Secretary of Department of Human Services, Secretary Val Arkush, outlined this plan in a letter earlier this week to USDA that simply said, we sued you, we won, the court ruled that you have to release the money, and instead of doing it your way, USDA, that's going to take more than a month, we can do it in less than 10 days. Just let us do that. And USDA has failed to respond. We haven't heard back.
Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, a Democrat at the Weinberg Northeast Regional Food Bank in Pittston, Pennsylvania today. He also said that private sector donors are matching dollars that the Shapiro administration is putting into food banks, and that's raised over $2 million in recent days. An NPR headline, the shutdown leaves telehealth for Medicare patients in limbo. And part of the article, the use of telehealth in Medicare began in earnest during the pandemic and quickly became popular. Nearly 7 million people on Medicare use telehealth services every year to see their doctors, but the federal shutdown put an abrupt halt on payments covering those services. The administrator of CMS, Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, Dr. Mehmet Oz, was asked today at a Milken Institute Healthcare Summit about the shutdown and his agency.
The FDA, because of their user fee structure, had the ability to keep some of their employees. It turns out CMS also has user fees. Researchers have to pay for the data that we collect through Medicare and other sources, and so we had stockpiled a little bit of money. And although in the first month of the shutdown we didn't use that, we realized that there were opportunities and went through the traps. And starting 2 weeks ago, we were able to bring back the 50% of CMS employees who had been furloughed. That's important because so much of what we have to do, like acting, taking the One Big Beautiful Act, Working Families Tax Cut legislation, and putting that to work, you need people. Yeah. And if you want to find a solution to improve the Affordable Care Act, you need people like actuaries, insurance experts. It doesn't just happen because we talk at a high level. You need people in the weeds. And I'm pleased to announce today that the $50 billion Rural Transformation Fund, the competition amongst 50 states, was the applications were due today, and all 50 states submitted, which is a real coup for the governors. But I'm also proud of my team for able to continue that process on time because it was statutory insisted upon that it happened today. We will give $50 billion away by the end of the year. And to put that in context, only about 7% of Medicaid money goes to rural America. That's about $19 billion a year, call 20. Giving rural America $10 billion more a year for 5 years, a 50% increase the amount of money they get, is transformative and will allow us to right-size the healthcare system in all kinds of innovative ways. And many of those innovations will spill over to suburban and urban America as well. And we figure out better ways for big hospitals to adopt smaller institutions, to use telemedicine more effectively, to improve working conditions so that you can recruit more people in the healthcare space or train more nurses. All these spill over to help the entire healthcare system.
Dr. Mehmet Oz, director of CMS, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, at a Milken Institute Healthcare Summit. Sitting beside him, the FDA Commissioner, Dr. Martin Makary. Wall Street today, the Dow down 398, NASDAQ down 445, S&P down 75. USA Today writing that propelled by cost-cutting and the growing adoption of artificial intelligence, employers slashed more than 150,000 jobs in October, the largest wave of layoffs in more than 20 years, a report from Challenger, Gray, and Christmas said Thursday. Seeking to cut costs, technology companies shed the most jobs, followed by the retail and services sectors. The outplacement firm Found, Amazon, UPS, Microsoft, and other firms have recently announced layoffs. That was from USA Today. Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, writes AP, will not seek re-election to the U.S. House, bringing to a close her storied career as not only the first woman in the Speaker's office, but arguably the most powerful in American politics. Pelosi, who has represented San Francisco for nearly 40 years, announced her decision Thursday. In a video address to voters, she appeared upbeat and forward-looking as images of her decades of accomplishments filled the frames, said that she would finish out her final year in office, and she left those who sent her to Congress with a call to action to carry out the legacy of agenda setting both in the U.S. and around the world. Reporting from Associated Press, here's the last minute and a half of the 5-minute video.
I say to my colleagues in the House all the time, no matter what title they have bestowed upon me, Speaker, Leader, Whip, there has been no greater honor for me than to stand on the House floor and say, I speak for the people of San Francisco. I have truly loved serving as your voice in Congress, and I've always honored the Song of St. Francis. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace, the anthem of our city. That is why I want you, my fellow San Franciscans, to be the first to know. I will not be seeking re-election to Congress. With a grateful heart, I look forward to my final year of service as your proud representative. As we go forward, my message to the city I love is this: San Francisco, know your power. We have made history, we have made progress, we have always led the way, and now we must continue to do so by remaining full participants in our democracy and fighting for the American ideals we hold dear. In doing so, we ensure that our city shines on as a beacon of hope, justice, and peace for the country and for generations to come. After all, San Francisco is the greatest city on earth with the most extraordinary people on earth, and a place that I will always believe is heaven on earth. Thank you, San Francisco, for trusting me to be your voice in Congress. May God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.
House Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, Democrat from California, the last minute and a half of a 5-minute video today as she said she would not be running for re-election in 2026. Former President Joe Biden, in a statement calling Pelosi the best Speaker of the House in American history, and writing, "We work together to grow our economy, create millions of jobs, and make historic investments in our nation's future. She has devoted much of her life to this country, and America will always be grateful." Former President Barack Obama saying that Pelosi will go down in history as one of the best speakers the House has ever had, and that she made us proud to be Democrats. President Donald Trump, with whom Speaker Pelosi clashed often, including 2 impeachments, was asked about her retirement.
Thank you, press. Thank you, press.
About Nancy Pelosi?
Nancy Pelosi's retirement.
I think she's an evil woman. I'm glad she's retiring. I think she did the country a great service by retiring. I think she was a tremendous liability for the country.
And on Dick Cheney.
I thought she was an evil woman who did a poor job, who cost the country a lot in damages and in reputation. I thought she was terrible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
President Donald Trump with reporters in the White House Oval Office. The current House Speaker, Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, in a news conference today, linked Nancy Pelosi's retirement to the retirement of Congressman Jared Golden, Democrat of Maine, and to the government shutdown, and to Tuesday's election of Zohran Mamdani as New York City mayor.
The Democrats have now set themselves on a collision course in their own tent. If you look at Spanberger in Virginia and Sherrill in New Jersey, they tried to run as moderate pragmatists. That's how they self-described. But they will be no match for the coming communist wave taking over their party right now. The energy is on the side of the Marxists. Look no further than the top 2 Democrats here in Congress. We've noted this here every day. They had to bend the knee to the socialists. Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer are both from New York. The top Democrat leader in the House and the top Democrat leader in the Senate, they couldn't get around that. And so Hakeem had to ultimately embrace it. He had to give the full blessing to Mamdani and his agenda. And he co-owns it. And Chuck Schumer flirted with it. He pandered all along. He flirted with that open endorsement till the better end, even though Mamdani is an activist against Israel and an anti-Semite. Chuck Schumer is the highest-ranked Jewish official in America, and even he couldn't bring himself to disclaim that. And as we've noted here every day, the sole reason for the entire federal government being shut down now, the sole reason for all the American people suffering all this pain and hardship, is because of the fear of political retribution from the far-left activists who run the Democrat Party. That is the motivation for the shutdown. It's never been about any policy issue at all. It was only so that they could show a fight and try to show that they're tough to this rising far-left activist base in the party. The old guard has been repudiated, and the radicals are taking over the Democratic Party. We have evidence now every day. Yesterday, Jared Golden announced he would not be running for re-election in the state of Maine. He's a moderate, and he has no place in his party anymore. And then this morning, you saw the headline. Former Speaker Nancy Pelosi has now announced her retirement this morning. That is a very important sign that I hope that you all will delve into. Even the famous San Francisco liberal is not far left enough for the neo-Marxists. We commend her for her services. We all do, everyone who serves in Congress, but there should be a lot written about that.
House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, at a news conference today on Capitol Hill with other House Republicans. The House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, who became the leader of the House Democrats after Nancy Pelosi stepped aside, paid tribute to his predecessor today at his own news conference.
Nancy D'Alessandro Pelosi will go down in history as the greatest speaker of all time. Her tenure has been iconic, legendary, historic, and transformational. The incredible pieces of legislation that she has moved into law through her brilliance, her wisdom, and her incredible grasp of how to get things done for the American people is too numerous to list right now, but it includes the Affordable Care Act, the American Rescue Plan, the PACT Act to provide health care to our veterans, the CHIPS and Science Act that has brought domestic manufacturing jobs back to the United States of America, and of course, the Inflation Reduction Act, which included the largest investment in combating the climate crisis in the history of the world. As a result of Nancy Pelosi's historic tenure, the nation is better off today than the one she found upon her arrival in 1987. It's been an honor and a privilege to be able to serve with her, work with her, be mentored by her, learn from her, and get things done for the American people alongside her historic tenure as Speaker.
The current House Minority Leader, Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, opening up a news conference today. Senator Chuck Schumer, the Democrat from New York as well, and the Senate Minority Leader said in a statement, few speakers in American history have left a mark as deep, as lasting, and as imposing as Nancy Pelosi. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Friday on C-SPAN's Ceasefire. At a moment of deep division in Washington, former Democratic National Committee Chair Donna Brazile and former Republican National Committee Chair Ronna McDaniel come together for a bipartisan dialogue on Tuesday's election results, potential impact on the 2026 midterms, and increasing partisanship. They join host Dasha Burns.
Ceasefire, bridging the divide in American politics.
Watch Ceasefire Friday at 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. Eastern and Pacific only on C-SPAN.
And if you miss an episode, you can find Ceasefire as a podcast at cspan.org/podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. A few more headlines from Politico. The Supreme Court is permitting the Trump administration to deny transgender people the option of obtaining passports that match their gender identity. The justices ruled 6-3 Thursday that the State Department can require that U.S. passports reflect the sex noted on the holder's birth certificate and can halt the issuance of passports with an X sex identifier signifying an unspecified gender identity, implemented by the Biden administration in 2022. And Democrats on the House Oversight Committee are calling on former Prince Andrew Mountbatten Windsor to sit for an interview as part of their probe into deceased sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The lawmakers, led by Oversight Ranking Member Robert Garcia, Democrat of California, wrote, "The committee is seeking to uncover the identities of Mr. Epstein's co-conspirators and enablers and to understand the full extent of his criminal operations. Well-documented allegations against you, along with your long-standing friendship with Mr. Epstein, indicate that you may possess knowledge of his activities relevant to our investigation." Certain blockbuster obesity drugs will be available for as little as $149 per month, and more Medicare enrollees will have access to them under two deals announced Thursday by the Trump administration, begins a CNN article. It goes on, the arrangements with drug makers Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk, which President Trump foreshadowed in remarks last month, are the latest in the administration's efforts to lower drug prices. President Trump made this announcement in the White House Oval Office, along with the heads of government health departments and agencies and the executives from those two companies.
Well, this is very exciting because, again, we're bringing drug prices down to levels that will be as low as possible. Tremendous cuts 200%, 300%, 500%, 700%, a little bit more than that. So today I'm thrilled to announce that the two world's largest pharmaceutical manufacturers, Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk, have agreed to offer their most popular GLP-1 weight loss drug. I call it the fat drug, remember? At drastic discounts. They're very effective drugs. And so far, I've never heard anything bad about them. I only hear good about them. It's pretty. Is there anything bad about them, Bob? Yeah, I haven't heard anything bad. Someday, maybe it'll come out, which will notify you immediately. But so far, I haven't heard that, including the drugs known as Zepbound and Wegovy, often called Ozempic. This is a triumph for American patients that will save lives and improve the health of millions and millions of Americans. Amazing thing. They are amazing. I want to thank Eli Lilly CEO David Ricks, a friend of mine. We've worked long and hard. He and I got this whole thing started in a way. And Novo Nordisk CEO Mike Dustar for joining us today. Great, talented people. They make a lot of money. I looked at the money, but they're entitled to the money because the companies are doing very well. Along with Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Secretary Howard Lutnick. Do you take any of this stuff, Howard?
Not yet.
Okay, good. CMS Administrator Mehmet Oz, he doesn't take it. Food and Drug Administrator Commissioner Marty McCary, and Director of Medicare Chris Klump. And we have Steve, where's Steve? Is he here? Head of Public Relations for the White House. He's taking it.
President Donald Trump in the White House Oval Office. More from the CNN article on the announcement. The prices consumers pay under the deals will vary based on their coverage and how they purchase the medications, among other factors. The current list prices of the drugs ranges from roughly $1,000 to $1,350, though the ultimate cost for consumers depends on their insurance and on discounts. And as part of the new deals, the drug makers have also agreed to reduce prices for a wider array of drugs in Medicaid and the list prices when their medications first hit the market. In exchange, drug makers are getting breaks on tariffs on imported pharmaceutical products and a dramatically expedited regulatory review for certain medicines. That was from CNN. Also in the Oval Office with the President, the Health and Human Services Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who spoke about how today's announcement fits into the larger Make America Healthy Again, or MAHA, agenda.
President Trump is the friend of the forgotten American. Obesity is a disease of poverty, overwhelmingly. And these drugs have only been available for people who have wealth. At one point, the majority of prescriptions, the highest concentration of prescriptions in this country, was the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And what about the people who live in rural areas, who live in food deserts? What about the people in urban areas who live in food deserts and are suffering from obesity and are locked into that system where they can only get ultra-processed foods, which are aggravating the problem? This will be a lifesaver to them. It's not a panacea. It's not a silver bullet. President Trump has also instructed us to address and end the root causes of chronic disease, and we're doing that. We're about to release dietary guidelines that are going to change the food culture in this country. They're going to change the kind of food the military gets. They're going to change the kind of food that our children get. We're releasing those in December. The Presidential Council for Physical Fitness is going to get more Americans into, particularly our children, into physical activity so that we can attack the root causes of this. But in the meantime, there's nothing more important than we can do than lower this price.
Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in the White House Oval Office during the announcement of a deal to lower prices on popular obesity drugs. There was a concerning moment during the announcement when Eli Lilly CEO David Ricks began to speak, and another guest behind him appeared to pass out.
For nearly 150 years, my company, Eli Lilly, has been investing in America. We've been advancing science and creating high-value jobs. But today we, oh, you okay? Gordon, you okay? Yeah.
Press out. Press. We're going. Thank you, press. Press. Right, guys. Cameras. We're done. Cameras.
And doctors in the White House Oval Office, including the CMS Administrator, Dr. Mehmet Oz, rushed to help Gordon Finley, an executive with the company Novo Nordisk. Reporters were cleared out of the room. A short time later, they were let back in, and President Trump said Mr. Finley was okay.
Well, thank you very much. One of the representatives of the companies, said one of the companies got a little bit lightheaded. You saw he went down, and he's fine. They just sent him out. He's got doctor's care, but he's fine. So we had a little bit of an interruption. Sorry for that. And I think we can just begin again with Eli Lilly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
President Trump in the White House Oval Office. You can find the full announcement at our video library at cspan.org. This is Washington Today. Washington Post writing, the Senate will vote Thursday on a bipartisan measure to block President Donald Trump from attacking Venezuelan territory in a new test of Republicans' willingness to oppose his use of military force in Latin America. Since early September, Trump's campaign of violence in the waters around Venezuela and Colombia has drawn fierce resistance from Democrats and legal experts. The killing to date of more than 65 people, they argue, violates the laws of war because the small boats being targeted are carrying civilians allegedly involved in the commercial sale of drugs, not armed attacks on U.S. citizens. The Pentagon has flooded the region with warships, attack helicopters, and high-end fighter jets. And Trump has said repeatedly in recent weeks that the operation against alleged drug smugglers would soon expand to encompass targets on land. That was from the Washington Post. Senator Tim Kaine, Democrat from Virginia, who is a sponsor of the resolution, spoke on the Senate floor before the vote.
I have had the opportunity, Mr. President, as have had some of my colleagues, to go into the classified facility here in the Senate and review the legal authorization document that the Trump administration has presented recently to the Senate concerning the military strikes against boats in the Caribbean and Pacific. Now, I reviewed that in the SCIF, so I can't talk about the content of it. I would encourage all of my colleagues to go review it because I basically believe there are three critical errors in that. One, a mistaken philosophy of executive war powers that derives from a misquotation of constitutional era documents that the framers were using as they grappled with the war powers questions. Two, a domestic legal rationale for when the president can unilaterally wage war that is completely contrary to the Constitution. And three, an international legal rationale that I think most of the members of this body would find to be quite a stretch if they review it. But the one thing, Mr. President, I can say is something that isn't in the document, and so I'm not in any danger of revealing classified information. What's not in the document that is available for senators to review is any legal rationale that would suggest that United States military action against the sovereign nation of Venezuela or any sovereign nation is covered by the legal rationale in that document. And just this morning, there has been public press suggesting that even the president recognizes that there is no legal rationale for such military action, again, absent congressional authorization. Why are we bringing this to the floor, Mr. President? We're bringing it to the floor because of a set of actions we've already discussed in a resolution that was filed by my colleague, Senator Schiff, a couple weeks back where we had a vote, the increased pace of military operations in the Caribbean and the Pacific near Venezuela. And the justification that the White House has used for those often references Venezuela. So there's an ongoing and increasing pace of strikes against boats that are killing dozens of individuals.
Senator Tim Kaine, Democrat from Virginia, on the Senate floor. Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican of South Carolina, also spoke on the floor against the Kaine resolution.
I like the idea that our commander-in-chief is telling narco-terrorist organizations, you're not only a foreign terrorist organization, but when you engage in threats to our country, a boat headed to America full of drugs, we're going to take you out. That's going to stop the flow of drugs. We've secured the border, but we now need to go to the networks that produce the products and distribute the products that eventually come to our shores and kill Americans. As to Venezuela, I would argue it's a narco-terrorist state. It is not a sovereign country in the sense of international law. That the leader of Venezuela, Maduro, is an indicted drug dealer with a $50 million bounty from the United States. That the recent election was stolen by Maduro. He's not a legitimate president under the laws of Venezuela, and he's not recognized as being legitimate by a multitude of international bodies. So I would say that Venezuela, in the hands of Maduro, is an existential threat to the people of the United States. That is a narco-terrorist state run by a drug kingpin that's used as a base of operations to send deadly drugs into our country, and it needs to stop. And whatever power that President Trump would like to use to stop that, I think he has the authority under the Constitution. And if we don't like it as Congress, we can defund the military operations. We can't replace our judgment for his.
Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican from South Carolina, on the Senate floor. The Senate voted 49 to 51 to block this resolution that would have blocked the Trump administration from taking military action against Venezuela. It was mostly party line, 2 Republicans joining the Democrats in voting yes, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska and Rand Paul of Kentucky. From AP, President Donald Trump will host leaders of 5 Central Asian countries at the White House on Thursday as he intensifies his hunt for rare earth metals needed for high-tech devices, including smartphones, electric vehicles, and fighter jets. Trump and the officials from Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan are holding an evening summit and dinner on the heels of Trump managing at least a temporary thaw with Chinese leader Xi Jinping on differences between the United States and China over the export of rare earth elements, a key point of friction in their trade negotiations. Reporting from AP, the president is hosting a dinner for the presidents of the 5 countries tonight. Those presidents met with Secretary of State Marco Rubio Wednesday night at the State Department.
It's an exciting time for us as well. You know, I think one of the things that President Trump has made very clear is that he wants American foreign policy to be rooted based on the national interest of the United States. Ultimately, that's how foreign policy works. You have national interests, we have national interests. When does foreign policy work best? It works best when the national interests of 2 countries are aligned. When your national interests and our national interests are aligned, when they're not aligned, that's where you need diplomacy, you need friendships and so forth. But when they're aligned, that's where we have to pursue those partnerships and create these ties, these deep ties. And I think they're aligned in so many ways. And they don't have to be aligned on every issue, but they're aligned on important ones, including economic development. From our perspective, we are looking for opportunities for American innovation and American business and American products to expand to more markets and more places, because we think that creates stronger ties between countries. From your perspective, you are looking to take the resources, both your people and natural resources, that God has blessed your nations with, and turn them into responsible development that allow you to diversify your economies. You don't just want to be a source of energy or a source of minerals. You want to use that responsibly to build out other sectors of your economies so that you provide long-term opportunities for your people and further develop. Our national interests are aligned, and I think tonight's reception, tomorrow's meeting, and some of the things we're going to do together in the months and weeks and to come are going to further strengthen that. So it's an honor to welcome you all here to the State Department. It'll be an honor to welcome your presidents. I know the president's excited about tomorrow's gathering as well. And I think it's an exciting opportunity and a new era in our relationship in Central Asia, which I think it's been about 10 years since there was a gathering of this kind. So it's been over a decade. So I would say that unfortunately over the last decade there's been sort of it's been longer than 10 years? 10 years. Okay, I thought he was saying it was in 20 years ago. Oh my gosh, it's even worse.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio Wednesday night at a reception for the presidents of 5 Central Asian countries. And with the U.S., they're known as the C5+1. Tonight, those leaders attend a White House dinner with President Trump. More from the Associated Press article on their visit. Washington is now looking for new ways to circumvent China on critical minerals. China accounts for nearly 70% of the world's rare earth mining and controls roughly 90% of global rare earth processing. Central Asia holds deep reserves of rare earth minerals and produces roughly half the world's uranium, which is critical to nuclear power production, but the region badly needs investment to further develop the resources. That was from AP. Also, this from Axios. Kazakhstan's president is expected to announce during a meeting with President Trump on Thursday that his country will join the Abraham Accords, U.S. officials tell Axios. While Kazakhstan and Israel have had full diplomatic relations for more than 30 years, the move is designed to reinvigorate the Abraham Accords as the U.S.-led framework for cooperation between Israel and the Arab and Muslim world, as senior U.S. officials said. That was from Axios. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Before we go, don't forget that a new C-SPAN ceasefire airs Friday at 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. Eastern. The guest this week, former Republican National Committee Chair Ronna McDaniel and former Democratic National Committee Chair Donna Brazile. The host, Asha Burns, will lead a bipartisan dialogue on Tuesday's election results, the potential impact of the 2026 midterms, and increasing partisanship. C-SPAN ceasefire Friday, 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. Eastern. Have a good night.